What happened when an undercover CEO ordered a simple latte at his own beachside café will surprise you. To our incredible listeners, those who believe in loyalty, quiet strength, and the power of second chances, this story is for you. You're the kind of people who understand that sometimes true leadership means stepping out of the spotlight to see what's really going on. Today's tale is about betrayal, resilience, and a long-lost bond between two brothers, reignited not through power, but through purpose. Get comfortable, because what begins with coffee ends with a legacy forever changed. Let's dive into Shoreline Brews. The sea breeze carried a familiar scent of salt and roasted espresso as Daniel Rhodes stood silently outside Shoreline Brews, the flagship cafe he had opened 2 decades earlier, with little more than a rusted espresso machine, his father's advice, and a passion for doing things the right way. Now in his late 50s, Daniel was a man known not for noise, but for standards. He built this business on precision, on warmth, and on trust. The glass facade of the shop reflected the late afternoon sun and a much older version of the man who once used to scrub those very windows himself. Inside, customers laughed over cold brews and cinnamon rolls, baristas danced behind the bar with muscle memory, and the signature driftwood and sage decor remained intact. But something felt off lately, not the kind off you see in the numbers, though revenue had dipped slightly, but the kind that showed up in the quiet things: a longtime customer who no longer stopped in, a regular who left an unusually terse online review. There were murmurs about slow service, off-ratioed drinks, new hires clashing with old staff. Daniel had always prided himself on knowing his cafe better than anyone, but growth had pulled him away. The past few years, he'd spent more time in meetings and airports than in the cozy chaos of the espresso bar. For most customers, Shoreline Brews still looked like the polished gem it had always been. But Daniel knew better than to trust a perfect surface. He stared through the window, eyes fixed on the plaque he hung behind the counter 2 decades ago: brew with purpose, lead with truth. That motto wasn't just about coffee. It was about how you treated people, how you ran a business, how you lived your name. Something had gone stale, and it wasn't the beans. He didn't need consultants, he needed the truth, the real kind, the kind you only got by stepping back into the shoes of a man who once pulled 300 shots a day and knew every regular's drink by heart. He turned from the glass and headed for his car. Tomorrow morning, he'd be back, not as the owner, not as the boss, but as just another customer. The man behind Shoreline Brews was going undercover. The next morning, Daniel Rhodes returned to Shoreline Brews dressed like any other beachgoer: sand-flecked sneakers, a faded hoodie, sunglasses, and a borrowed straw hat that shaded his face just enough. Gone was the tailored blazer and pressed collar he was known for at shareholder meetings. Today he was Dan from out of town, blending in with the tourists seeking caffeine before their coastal strolls. He joined the short morning line, letting the murmur of grinders, steaming milk, and casual laughter wash over him. From this new vantage point, everything looked fine. Polite greetings, colorful chalkboard specials, and well-worn stools filled with sunburned surfers and remote workers. But Daniel wasn't here for appearances. He was watching the details. The pace, the timing, the energy behind the counter. That's when he saw Luca, the barista, running the espresso machine like a seasoned musician. His movements were precise but never robotic, tamping grounds with a craftsman's touch, steaming milk with careful attention, wiping his station every third drink like clockwork. When it was Daniel's turn, he ordered the honey foam cold brew, a seasonal special he'd never approved but had heard about from a review that described it as shockingly balanced. Luca didn't offer showy conversation, just a nod and a soft coming right up. A few minutes later, Daniel took the first sip and froze. The drink was extraordinary, bold but smooth, creamy yet bright. A layer of velvety honey foam floated perfectly above the cold brew with citrusy brightness and a whisper of vanilla. The flavor transported him, not just to a memory, but to a very specific one. The proportions, the balance. This wasn't just talent, this was familiarity, intimate familiarity. Daniel sat by the front window, slowly sipping and pretending to scroll through his phone. He watched Luca handle a small rush with calm efficiency. No wasted movement, No need for flair, just quietly excellent. A staff member called out to Luca, who gave a polite nod and went back to prepping the next drink. There was no arrogance, only quiet confidence. Daniel made a mental note to ask his regional manager about Luca later, but even then something unspoken had begun to rise in his chest. A strange mix of curiosity and memory, the kind of feeling you don't expect from a cup of coffee, unless the hands that made it once shared your childhood kitchen. A few days later, Daniel returned during a slower mid-afternoon window when most beachgoers had drifted toward the shore. He ordered a simple drip and lingered near the back, settling into a cozy corner booth adjacent to the hallway that led to the employee lounge and storage area. The ambient noise of indie music and soft conversation gave him cover, but his ears were tuned to the shifting tones behind the scenes. That's when he heard them. Chloe and Kenzie, two baristas he'd vaguely recognized from past visits, chatting in hushed voices just beyond the threshold of the hallway. "I switched out Luca's vanilla syrup with the regular stuff again," Chloe snickered, her voice tinged with glee. "Let's see how he talks his way out of another lukewarm Yelp review." Kenzie giggled. "Trevor says it's working. He's pushing for Avery to dump him next week. Says Luca's making the cafe look pretentious." Daniel's blood ran cold. Trevor, the name stung. A former employee who had left bitterly last year and was now managing High Tide Roasters, a rival coffee shop down the coast. Trevor had always resented Shoreline's emphasis on consistency and craft, favoring trendy gimmicks over tradition. Now it seemed he was orchestrating Luca's downfall from the outside, using Chloe and Kenzie as his agents. "He promised me the head barista spot if we get Luca out," Kenzie whispered, "and better shifts. Plus, he's already got Avery on his side." The laugh that followed sent a sick twist through Daniel's stomach. This wasn't petty workplace drama, it was calculated sabotage, and it was happening under his roof. He carefully sipped his coffee, pretending to read a book while his mind raced. Luca wasn't failing, he was being set up. And more disturbingly, the cafe's own manager, Avery, was apparently complicit. Daniel fought the urge to confront them right then and there. Instead, he quietly pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and started documenting everything. Names, phrases, dates. Years of business had taught him that emotion alone doesn't fix a problem. You needed facts, evidence. He had come here to check on quality and service. What he'd found was a betrayal that ran deeper than oversteamed milk or slow ticket times. And if Luca was enduring this every day and still managing to deliver world-class drinks, then maybe, just maybe, there was far more to this barista than met the eye. Daniel returned to Shoreline Brews every other day for the next week, always in disguise, always quiet. He chose different times. Morning rush, late afternoon lull, evening crowd. Each visit offering a new angle on the inner workings of the cafe. What he saw was a study in contrast. Luca, ever composed, moved through each shift with grace under pressure, adjusting for what Daniel now recognized as sabotage. Orders came in wrong, syrups had strange aftertastes, milk ran out during peak hours. Yet Luca never blamed anyone, never raised his voice. Instead, he calmly corrected mistakes, remade drinks, and offered customers sincere apologies with the kind of authenticity you can't fake. On one occasion, Daniel noticed Luca finishing his shift only to stay another hour, restocking supplies and checking inventory, tasks that should have fallen to others. He even caught Luca pulling a small container of his own syrups from a personal bag behind the counter. "Backup," Luca muttered to another staff member, in case something gets missed. But Daniel knew. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was insurance. Luca had been adapting to sabotage in real time. One morning, Daniel struck up casual conversation with Carlos, the dishwasher and janitor in his early 60s, who had been with Shoreline Brews since the beginning. "Luca's got something," Carlos said, wiping his hands on a towel. "Most kids fold under heat. He's different, quiet type, reminds me of someone." Daniel smiled faintly, wondering if Carlos saw the resemblance too. Even Marta, the prep lead, confided to a customer while ringing up their scone. "Don't know what's going on, but Luca's the only reason I haven't quit." The atmosphere in the cafe was shifting. Loyalty was beginning to form around Luca, not Avery. Still, The silence from upper staff was chilling. No one seemed to question the constant disruptions, the sudden disappearances of inventory, or the kitchen miscommunications. Daniel realized that this wasn't just about protecting one employee anymore. This was about saving the culture of the very business he'd built. And the person showing the most leadership wasn't wearing a manager's badge. It was the man quietly saving every shift from collapse, one perfect pour at a time. Daniel's suspicion that Luca was someone more than he seemed was becoming certainty. The only thing left to do was find out exactly who he really was. It happened on a quiet Thursday morning. The sky outside Shoreline Brews was overcast, the kind of coastal gray that lulled the boardwalk into calm, and Daniel had chosen a corner table near the pastry display to sip his usual and observe. The specials board caught his eye. Salted honey mocha with a cinnamon twist. It wasn't just the ingredients that grabbed him. It was the phrasing. That exact combination with that name had lived once in his own family kitchen. Years ago, when their father was still alive and he and his younger brother Lucas spent weekends experimenting with drinks, Lucas had created that mocha. He'd been so proud of it, perfecting the balance of salt against sweet, foam texture, and the snap of cinnamon at the end. Daniel had written the recipe down in a notebook that still sat on his shelf at home, dusty but treasured. He'd never shared it with anyone, and yet here it was, on a chalkboard in his own café, made not for nostalgia, but because someone knew it from memory. He ordered it, hands trembling slightly. When the drink arrived, he took one slow sip and closed his eyes. There it was, that unmistakable finish, that buried note of childhood, of something once broken and now, somehow, served warm again. The barista behind the counter was wiping down the espresso machine, unaware of the memory storm he'd just unleashed. Daniel didn't need to ask any more, he knew. He didn't know how Lucas had ended up here or why he'd applied under another name, but there was no mistaking it now. Luca Bennett wasn't some coincidental talent. He was Lucas Rhodes, Daniel's brother. The same brother who had refused to join the business after college, who had turned down Daniel's offer to mentor him in the early days of Shoreline Brews, who had walked out of a Thanksgiving dinner 7 years ago with the words, "I'll earn it my own way." Daniel left the cafe without finishing his drink, his thoughts tangled in guilt, wonder, and something else, pride. Lucas had found his way back, not through favors or handouts, but through the grind, through foam, flavor, and quiet excellence. And now Daniel understood why the Sabotage hadn't broken him, because Lucas wasn't just working for a paycheck, he was proving something. Daniel drove straight to his corporate office, pulled up the employee files, and found it. Luca Bennett, hired 6 months ago, references from Seattle using their mother's maiden name, a file that should have passed across Daniel's desk but had slipped through unnoticed. Until now. Daniel returned to Shoreline Brews the next afternoon. No disguise, no hoodie, no sunglasses. This time, he walked through the front doors in a crisp navy blazer, loafers polished, and the signature Shoreline lapel pin gleaming on his chest. The clatter of mugs and easy chatter fell into sudden silence as employees looked up, stunned. Some hadn't seen him in years, only in framed photos along the walls. Others had never met him at all. He offered a polite smile and a short nod to the hostess. "I'll need the main dining area cleared for a staff meeting," he said calmly. 15 minutes. Words spread like wildfire. Whispers echoed behind the espresso bar. Chloe and Kenzie shared a panicked glance. Avery, the manager, emerged from the back, his confidence faltering the moment Daniel's gaze met him. By 5 o'clock, every staff member was seated in the main room, surrounded by the warmth of driftwood accents and surfside murals, Daniel's carefully crafted vision of community. He stood at the front with a laptop, his tone calm but laced with gravity. "Most of you know me as the founder of Shoreline Brews. I built this place on 2 things, craftsmanship and trust." He paused, both of which have been compromised. With a tap of the keyboard, the projector displayed muted security footage. Chloe slipping extra syrup into Luca's bottles. Kenzie hiding order tickets behind the counter. Avery receiving a small envelope from a man identified as Trevor, a rival cafe owner. A wave of disbelief, and then disgust, rippled through the room. Daniel's voice remained steady. This wasn't just workplace drama. It was organized sabotage, and it ends today. He turned to Avery. "You've betrayed your team and this brand. You're terminated, effective immediately." He nodded toward the door where a shoreline security officer stood waiting. "Chloe, Kenzie, the same applies to you." The women rose slowly, eyes wide as murmurs filled the room. "Any other participants in this scheme? This is your opportunity to step forward now. After this, there will be no second chances." Two junior staffers quietly stood and exited with the others. Once the room settled, Daniel addressed those who remained. "For the rest of you who kept your heads down, who showed up and did your job with dignity, thank you. This place stands because of people like you." His eyes moved to Luca, seated quietly at the back, unsure of what came next. "And now," Daniel said, "there's one more conversation that needs to happen, privately." He gestured toward the office. Luca stood, and the room fell still again. The reckoning wasn't just corporate. It was personal, and it was long overdue. The moment the office door closed behind them, the air grew heavier, not from tension, but from everything unsaid over 7 long years. Luca remained standing, arms crossed, unsure whether to be defensive or relieved. Daniel took the seat behind the desk but didn't lean back. He studied his brother with quiet eyes, noting the tired lines around his face, the way he still ran a hand through his hair the same way he used to when frustrated. "You knew?" Luca finally asked, his voice low. Daniel nodded. "Not at first, but that honey mocha, that was Dad's recipe, and you were the only other person who knew it that well." Luca let out a long breath and pulled the chair opposite the desk. "I didn't want to be Daniel Rhodes' little brother getting a free ride. I wanted to earn something on my own." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. "And you did, every bit of it." There was a long pause. Outside, the hum of the café preparing for evening service served as background to years of stubborn silence between them. "Why didn't you come to me when things got bad?" Daniel asked. Luca looked away. "Because I wasn't here for sympathy. I came to prove to myself that I could build something real, and if I failed, I wanted the failure to be mine." Daniel leaned forward. "Well, you didn't fail. You held this place together while being sabotaged from every angle. And still, your drinks, your service, better than anything I had at your age." The compliment hung in the air, heavier than either of them expected. Daniel took a breath. "I want you to stay, officially, as general manager, with your real name on the door." Luca hesitated. "And if I say no?" Daniel shrugged gently. "Then I'll respect it. You've earned that right. But I hope you'll say yes, not because I'm your brother, but because this place needs someone who gives a damn." Slowly, something shifted in Luca's expression. The walls didn't fall, but a door cracked open. "I'll think about it," he said. Then, after a moment, "But if I stay, I run it my way." Daniel smiled. "Exactly what I was hoping you'd say." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the beginning of something new, something mended. 6 months later, Shoreline Brews looked and felt like the dream Daniel had always imagined, but with a vitality that hadn't existed in years. The coastal café buzzed with purpose, not chaos. Baristas moved in sync, espresso machines hissed with confidence, and customers lingered longer not just for the coffee, but for the warmth. At the center of it all stood Lucas Rhodes, no longer Luca Bennett, but fully himself. A program embroidered with his full name, General Manager, worn like armor earned in battle. The transition hadn't been easy. Trust had to be rebuilt, systems overhauled. But Lucas did it, not with flash or flair, but with steady hands and quiet leadership. He brought back morning prep meetings, trained new hires personally, and even created a mentorship program for aspiring baristas, one of whom was Carlos, now teaching latte art to teenagers from the local high school. Daniel visited less often, but always watched closely when he did. He no longer felt the urge to step in. Lucas had the floor now, and he'd earned it, not as a Rhodes, not as the younger brother, but as the best man for the job. Even High Tide Roasters, the once boisterous competitor down the coast, had started to feel the pressure. Word had gotten around that Shoreline Brews was back, and better than ever. Reviewers mentioned Lucas by name. Customers praised his signature drinks like the salted honey mocha, now affectionately called the Rhodes. But for Daniel, the greatest success wasn't in the numbers or the menu. It was watching the staff, old and new, rally behind his brother, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by to drop off a framed photo. Their father, in his old apron, standing behind the counter on opening day, grinning like a man who believed in big dreams and bigger coffee. Lucas took the frame in silence, a tight smile forming. Without a word, he hung it near the specials board. Underneath it, he pinned a note in black ink. Brew with purpose, lead with truth. Daniel stepped back and nodded, emotion swelling behind his eyes. This cafe wasn't just back on its feet, it had been reborn. And the legacy, once fractured, now had two sets of hands carrying it forward. The sun was beginning its slow descent over the ocean, casting golden streaks across the windows of Shoreline Brews, as Daniel and Lucas sat side by side on the weathered bench just outside the cafe. The scent of cinnamon and roasted beans drifted through the open door, mingling with the salty breeze. They sat in companionable silence, sipping coffee. No business talk, no strategies, just brothers. Lucas's cup bore his name now, etched into a custom ceramic mug gifted by the staff. Daniel glanced sideways at him, quietly marveling at how far they'd come, not just the cafe, but the two of them. What had once been a chasm of pride and silence had narrowed into something solid, something real. Inside, the cafe hummed with life. Marta joked with new hires at the pastry counter. Carlos explained milk-steaming ratios to a teenager with wide eyes and shaky hands, and customers gathered near the photo of their father, now hanging near the specials board. "I invited Mom," Lucas said suddenly, breaking the quiet. "She should be here any minute." Daniel blinked, surprised, then let out a soft laugh. "You didn't warn me," Lucas smirked. "Consider it payback for showing up undercover with a fake name." They both chuckled, and in that moment, the heaviness of the past seemed to dissolve into the sea air. Through the cafe's front window, Daniel spotted a familiar figure stepping out of a car. Gray hair pulled back, a tote of baked goods in one hand, wearing a smile that mirrored the pride on both of their faces. As they rose to greet her, Daniel placed a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder. "Whatever this place becomes from here, it's better because of you." Lucas gave a quiet nod. "And because of you, it's still standing." They stepped inside together, met with the scent of brewing coffee and the soft murmur of regulars. The community they'd built, once fractured, was now whole again. And above it all, on the wall behind the register, hung a small wooden sign etched with the words that had guided everything: "Brew with purpose, lead with truth." The cafe wasn't just a business anymore, it was a second chance at legacy, at family, and at something far richer than the finest roast: reconciliation. The story of Shoreline Brews reminds us that legacy is not built on perfection, it's built on integrity, humility, and the courage to repair what's been broken. Daniel and Lucas's journey shows how pride and silence can drive even family apart, but also how resilience, quiet leadership, and earned respect can bridge even the deepest divides. While betrayal and sabotage threatened the heart of the cafe, it was truth, not authority, that ultimately restored it. Lucas didn't rise through favoritism, he rose through dedication, grit, and grace under pressure. And Daniel, though a successful founder, learned the importance of stepping back, listening closely, and letting others lead when the time is right. For an older generation who knows the weight of legacy and the value of second chances, this story is a reminder that leadership isn't about control, it's about trust. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies in vulnerability, and the most lasting impact comes not from what we build alone, but from what we rebuild together. Whether in business or in family, the real reward isn't just success, it's reconciliation, mutual respect, and the shared belief in something worth preserving.